Welcome to our space where talking about the inspiring things with inspiring people is what inspires us. Waiting for you here are the infinite possibilities that creation, collaboration, and connection have to offer. A universe where we see everything through rose-tinted spectacles that help us to keep our faith in the power of imagination alive and well. And now, let's talk. Welcome everyone to Metralla Rosa. I'm here next to Iluá Hauck da Silva. Hauck. Oh my God! How is the pronunciation?
German.
Hauck. Iluá Hauck da Silva. And it's a great pleasure for me. It really means a lot. I particularly love her visions, clear and beautiful, and the way she combines this very conceptual approach, and at the same time, everything she does looks so figurative. I love the fact that in general, she's quite into, I would say, obsessed about the human condition, the body, the anatomy, but everything she does also relates to history, Christianity, theology, symbolism. So it is quite interesting. Iluá, I'm not going to say that surname again, is from Brazil, but she has been living in Britain for most of her life, probably more years in Britain, in UK than in Brazil. But we could say that she is equally Brazilian as British. Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's really a great pleasure.
Likewise.
And one of the things I would like to start talking with you is that ability you have to bring something very universal, quite magnificent in terms of meaning, to things really peculiar, particular, and not necessarily coming from the detail to the whole. Mm-hmm. It's something that you feel in any of your artworks, especially when you try to depict a little bit what it means. Why a heart? Why a brain? Why a piece of body? Mm-hmm. It has always been like that.
Yeah, I've always been interested in how we can communicate broader existential concepts through particular signifiers. And of course, the signifiers for the human condition are, well, some of them are body parts and internal organs. So why a heart? Well, it could be any particular heart, but nevertheless it functions as a signifier for love, for life. You know, we always associate the image of the heart with love, or the image of the brain with rationality and intelligence, or rational intelligence. And in other instances, so for example, my piece, Despair, which has very agonized
body expression.
Body expression. Well, it is a particular body, but nevertheless, it communicates and articulates an idea of despair as a general human experience. So anyone could identify with that sentiment, even though it is a particular body.
So the connection with the human part have always been there. It's not something that came after you graduate from the Goldsmith School. Can you remember your first artwork or your first memory related with you being an artist?
Yes, I can. So I actually remember things from when I was a toddler, like say when I was 18 months old. And I remember when I first started interacting with images in art books, I was very little. And my first experience of producing a work of art that dealt with this kind of particular and commenting broader, I was still in school. And, it was just, I was learning Dadaism at the time. And I just, of course, did a very Duchampian ready-made thing. And, all these bits and bobs of, consumerist society, and was a commentary on capitalism as a whole. So the commenting on the bigger picture through the particular, has been with me for a long time.
And it is interesting, especially with this art residency that you did for the Optometrist College of London, in London, because there you actually really had the opportunity to not just going from the particular, the peculiar to the universal, but also through your own story, even if you, as we were talking before this interview started, you have been using your own body, not because you are being especially obsessed about the self-reference, but more because you are the model you have more at hand. In that case, I feel that you, in the case of Pathos Ocularis, the exhibition that is actually still at the College of Optometrists, the museum here in London, you had the opportunity to go to a real self-reference in a way that was more emotional than any time before.
Well, it's interesting that you refer to it as an opportunity. Thank you for that. Thank you for that, because it was actually the most difficult body of work I've ever produced. Because I don't make work about myself. As you said, I do use my body as a model for my work. Because I have worked as a life model. The poses that I require are painful. Holding poses that require so much attention.
Like that despair sculpture we were.
You have to stay still. It's painful. It's tiring. And I'm the artist. I know I will be dedicated and committed to holding that pose for as long as it's necessary. Now, it has nothing to do with my emotional history or my pain. Whereas the body of work for the College of Optometrists it didn't require me to, but the whole history meant that it made sense for me to explore my own eye pathology, because it was just a non-coincidence. So I had a very serious illness. It could have killed me if before modern day medicine I would have died. And then I got the residency. Within half an hour of starting my residency, starting the research at their library, I came across an article in a book written by the very doctor who looked after me about the pathology I had. And I told the curator, Neil, oh, look at this coincidence. And this is what I had. And he was the one who said, wow, this is very unusual. It's a very unusual illness at this day and age. Why don't you explore that? And it sounds all exciting and good on the face of it. But really, when it came to making the work and meditating, it was really, really difficult. Exactly, really, really horrible. I know I had never actually just cried in my studio trying to make work, and also I was kind of resisting it a lot,
But I think that was an opportunity, because I understand you are an artist that seems to relate to very rational processes, very, very edgy kind of mental process, and in that sense you have everything under control, and is actually your territory. But in this opportunity you have to bring that to the body and feel it, and I think that's why that artwork is so beautiful and so amazing, especially the Santa Lucia. That, by the way, you told me that today is
Sundays.
Wow, and I don't believe in casualties. It really has to mean something, but we will get there. We will get there. Please, because we are talking here of things that you know, I know, but not everyone knows. So let's start to talk. Tell this story from the beginning. In 2015, you had an illness. Okay, I want to if you can remember, how was the moment you started feeling ill, and which ones were the symptoms?
Well, so actually it started as a normal flu in January, and I wouldn't get better, and then I actually got worse. And I had a severe ear infection. It was really, really painful. And then I got better, but not entirely better. And I was not well, and I had all these pains in my head. And we're now in March, and I was still not well. And one day I woke up and I would see everything double with this eye. So I would see 2 glasses, 2 hands, everything. And I thought, well, if this persists, I'm going to Moorfields Hospital. And so I did.
Was it super scary? Or were you
It
fine?
wasn't as scary, but I knew I was really not well. And there are things that say, and people don't understand also when you're ill, because I didn't look very ill. I it's not like I looked horrific.
But you knew.
Yes, and there are things that say, for example, let's go and do this thing in, Richmond Park. And I was like, actually, I'm not well enough to go for a long walk.
So instinctively, you were very connected with your illness.
I knew that
your
it was
symptoms.
just like, And at Moorfields, when they asked me, so you serious, you're not lying, you really see everything that I say, yes. And they're like, right, you need to go up to neurology like now.
You said in another interview that the nurse actually asked you, "Are you being serious? Are you really seeing things double?" I imagine that because they maybe have so many, cuckoo, crazy people that goes there and just to be. Just to have the attention that they need, they maybe make things up. But how can you make something like that up?
Well, and also I guess because for the medical staff themselves, if they all of a sudden face a case that is really unusual, it's also a shock for them. I've seen medical staff for going, oh my God, because it's not nice for everyone, even for them. If they see that someone is suffering for something really serious, But anyway, so I went to neurology, did all these tests, and a few days later I got a call from the hospital and saying, well,
few days later.
A few days later, yeah.
So all those days you were watching things double.
And there were also other complications in a process, but I'll keep it in a nutshell. Keep it simple.
I know you never sound very tragic or drama. You don't make a drama out of it, but it was.
Well, it was. I don't see why I would make a drama out of it.
People tells you their stories. There are different approaches, of course. But there's people that they really make everything sounds even bigger than it is. And in your case, it is very big, and you try to always minimize the importance. Is that a characteristic of your personality?
Maybe I have become properly English.
Maybe. I would say, yeah, definitely. In that situation, you were acting very, very in an English way.
Keep this stiff upper lip.
Yes.
Well, but also, just trying to keep the conversation clear, because really then the expression of the emotional pain is in the work, even though I realize also that the work's quite lighthearted. In a sense that, my self-portrait as St. Lucy, which communicates, the illness. So, I have a double eye, and I look at quite ridiculous. And so, you look at it, and I didn't make myself look pretty in that work, nor particularly ill either. There's no sense of drama. It's kind of
there's an stoicism in that image.
Well, and also, I look a bit funny. Let's face it. I look a bit hilarious. Well, I think so. I didn't try and make myself look particularly idealized. But that's because the reason for defaulting to St. Lucie is because before we had medication, and say you would go and pray for St. Lucie, and you had an image of St. Lucie and pray for her, you would be in this position where you realize that whatever it is that you're going through is not as bad as martyrdom.
Mm-hmm.
You haven't had your eyes gouged out, and you're going to be killed. So there's that, in that sense, that the image of the saint mitigates and soothes your suffering, and that was the intention of it. And the illness that I had, actually, it was getting to a stage that can be related to the eye models, to the pathologies that are represented in a museum, because no one really, or very rarely, like in my case, someone ends up with an infection in their skull.
Yeah.
It was on the brink of it spreading to my brain.
How that, do you know, after being so close to the, you have been studying this quite a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know why that happened to you?
Yeah.
The infection in itself?
Yeah, so my immune system was very, very low, and also the shape of my skull means that the infection could travel from my ear into my head, and the bone got infected.
The base of the skull?
The base of the skull. So there's bone
here, okay,
here, and here, and inside.
All right. I thought it was
lower.
Okay.
Yeah. And it was on the brink of spreading to my brain. So that's really advanced. And it's in this kind of instance that really, there was no going back before antibiotics and steroids.
But coming back to the moment you were called by the neurologist,
mm-hmm.
and they said, no, you need to come to the hospital mm-hmm. because you need a special care, a special attention. Mm-hmm. What happened there?
So they said, oh, we think you have a bit of a skull inflammation. And, my father is a doctor, and I thought, oh, they are really toning this down.
Yeah.
It's like, pack a bag, come to the hospital. You need to be in hospital for a few days, and it might just be a bit of an inflammation. I was like, well, that's very incongruous. But okay, so I did, and it was funny because I had to tell my father that I was being hospitalized, basically, admitted into hospital. And he couldn't quite believe it. He kind of couldn't say goodbye to me. And I was like, I kind of need to go. So I knew I was not well. I knew that it was potentially really quite serious. But I don't know, just kind of deal with it. And so
you were told that it could end up in an operation, but it didn't.
Yes, yeah. So basically, I was told that if after 12 hours of intravenous antibiotics and steroids, the internal swelling didn't come down, then they would have to cut my mastoid, which is this bone here, open and operate on my head. But luckily, the medication worked really, really well. And that was not necessary. And
did you remember yourself praying in that moment? Because I know maybe for choice we don't choose do it, mm-hmm. but sometimes under real pressure or when we are very scared. My mom was an atheist, mm-hmm. but I remember myself praying a lot of times.
So it's interesting you mentioned that, because the way I wasn't brought up a strict Catholic. My parents, my father was not practicing Catholic.
Well, being a scientist also, it's kind of.
But then my grandparents, my grandmothers, I had to pray with them, so I didn't have to, but they
That was
asked me,
part of
there
your-
was like, okay, we pray in the morning, we pray in the evening. That's something that we did. And this, this interesting kind of, you default to thought of prayer, and inevitably, in moments like that, you do inquire about the divine, the miracle, but not not just in moments of tragedy, but also say when rock climbing, and there's nothing like being on the top of a mountain for getting the feeling of the miracle. You do feel that a sense of the divine. Absolutely. So it's interesting that both in moments of kind of an exacerbated
happiness
or an intense experience in nature, or which is the outer world, the expansion, and the infinity of everything, of the universe, or diametrically the opposite, that moment of personal tragedy and the journey inwards. The connection is virtually the same. The questioning of the divine, the miracle of existence, are both called into question. So definitely is one of the reasons here why you're also working with St. Lucy.
Yeah.
Felt very, very pertinent. Yeah.
Did it mean something for your life, a moment of before and after, in terms of that realization of we as a human beings in the last era have been quite disconnected with the idea of divinity, because we have made our path on earth related more with what we can see, what we can experience, what we can hold, what we can understand. And slowly I feel we have been culturally living that part of even of knowledge beside. Do you feel in that regard before and after?
No, I don't feel before and after in that regard, because I guess being an artist and being very sensitive to everything around me and inside me, there was always this kind of very heightened sense of making the most of life, making the most of everything, never taking anything for granted, seeing beauty in everything. That's always been the case. I've never not considered things divine. I think what is the difference, say, between a flower and a table? Is still could be equally sacred and equally divine or not, depending on what
point of view.
But because I was ill for a whole year, I finally only totally recovered. Was already like February 2016.
That's the moment you started working again?
Pretty much I worked very little. I actually, even though I was ill, I did manage to exhibit. I did manage to, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Somehow.
How?
Yeah. I was ill. I was not well. I was very debilitated and, working on kind of a battery saving mode.
Yeah.
But I guess I can't live without making art or being artistically engaged. So I don't know. I just
it happened.
Yeah.
A miracle. That was a miracle.
Exactly. But yes, I finally managed to really go back to work was in 2016, and so then for the after, then yeah, there were things that I was very shy and very hesitant about, going forwards with. And that was like, come on, you could have died. Just, if you hear a no, it's a no, but right to the place where you want to exhibit, ask.
So that was an after.
It was an after.
That was a change.
That was a change. That was the impulse, that the kind of getting a lift from the bad experience. That was just like, come on, go for it. You have nothing to lose, kind of thing. So yeah.
And has that brought good results?
Yes.
I guess yeah. So let's talk about this exhibition, Pathos Ocularis.
Yeah, okay.
And how did the connection with the college started? How did that happen?
So what happened was that a friend of mine who is an occasional art collector, Adrian William, and he's a fabulous costumier, and he asked me to make an eye sculpture for him after he'd seen some of my work.
And he knew about your situation?
Oh yeah, we were
very good
friends. Yeah, exactly. He remembers when I was ill.
Yeah.
And I said to him, funny enough, eyes require a glass technique that I haven't studied. So I know how to cast glass and fuse glass and other things, but eyes require a technique that I unfortunately have not studied. So I said to him, listen, I need to do some research and think how I can work a way around this.
Your favorite thing.
Yes, I do enjoy.
I'm sorry, but I have to do some research.
Well, but also I am very pedantic about techniques. Technical problems, I love resolving technical problems. I spend ages.
I could have guessed
It's just so pleasurable. Like, okay, there is an existential philosophical concept to work with, but then there are all these, minute technical problems, and I adore meditating on them and resolving them. How is the mold going to be made? What materials? What there's the dialogue between the concepts and the technique and the technical problems and the materials. That's why the tools, exactly. Yes. Wax tools all over
like
my
a
kitchen.
Fetish tool.
Exactly.
So you did your research.
So when I said to my friend, I said, well, there is the museum, the British Optical Association Museum. I'm going to go there and look at, what they have. And he said, no, I want to come with you. Because the reason why he wanted his sculpture is because he loves eyes.
Yeah.
So we went together, and because the museum, this is open to the public for visitations anytime, it's required that you book an appointment with the curator. And so we did, and the curator Neil asked us, why are you here? And Adrian said, oh, Iluá is an artist, and I've commissioned her to make me a glass eye, and we're here to do some research. And Neil said, oh, really? She's an artist. That's interesting. You're here to do your research. Neil was very excited about our visit.
And curious.
Yes. And so he asked me, could you show me some of your work? And I did. And it was one of the most reassuring,
very enthusiastic,
lovely things that's ever happened. That, virtually immediately he said, oh, would you like to exhibit here?
Like that?
Just like that. Just, really,
wow.
That was really instantaneous, natural response to seeing my work. It was really validating. I cannot deny. It was really wonderful. And of course, within half a second, I said yes.
Let me think about it. Yes.
Yeah,
I made up my mind.
Exactly.
And that also gave you an amazing opportunity, I guess, because your dad is a doctor.
Yeah.
And you were into these things.
Well, so
already.
that's gets a bit complicated there. But so the fact that then Neil appointed me to be artist in residence, and I went on this journey researching eye health in general, and then my own pathology and creating all this work. in relation to my dad, funny you should mention it. Even though, as a child, I was given basically paper and pencils. Here you go. You don't have anyone to look after you.
Entertain yourself.
And also, where he lived was very close to the medical center where he worked. So, literally next door. So it's just basically...
We are talking about Sao Paulo here.
No, we're talking about Itatiba, a very small town in the countryside.
Near to... No.
Yeah, about an hour away from Sao Paulo.
Okay, sorry.
So actually very safe, so I could just be like, there was a beautiful square in front of the medical center with this tree. So I was either, climbing the trees or drawing. And my dad's consultation room was filled up with my drawings. So you would have a thought that my dad would have been a bit more supportive of my work and of my choice of being an artist, but
no,
not really. I think recently, he didn't get it. Things for quite some time. So, for example, when I started making the glass hearts, to begin with, I started like just drawing a lot of hearts, and as I showed the hearts, he was like, the archery is wrong.
Yeah, he was watching it from an anatomical perspective.
But that's good. Well, it is and it isn't, because the reality is, I know in special art, having spent quite a bit of time at the pathology museum, looking at specimens and drawing, pickled hearts. Internal organs are like external features.
They can
no one has the same. Yeah. So is it, what is a human nose? What are human lips?
That's amazing.
It's, completely different. And the same are with hearts or lungs or kidneys. Everyone's are different, which make them even more interesting and beautiful. But so there's no right or wrong, unless of course if you draw a heart that ends up looking like
a tree.
Exactly, a tree.
Maybe.
And so when I started making the test pieces for the eyes on a platter for Sir Lucy, the body of work. And again, my dad looked at I sent him a picture, and instead of saying, "Oh, interesting," or "What does it mean?" or he just goes, "The eyes are looking in different directions."
Yes.
Well, yes.
It is on purpose.
Yes, on purpose. Why? But the fact that he will so readily comment on something that is not good instead of asking, "Why have you made it like this?"
Exactly.
That's
what dads do.
Exactly.
In general. So
and I always feel like, see, if you had chosen to be a doctor instead of medicine, you would know these are not represented in the wrong way.
Maybe for him, he wanted you to be a. Did he wanted you to be?
I think so. Yeah, but I think that's probably because from a very young age, I really engaged with his medical books, with medicine in general.
But you were looking at those things from a very different perspective, probably.
Yeah.
Was it because aesthetically it was super attractive to you?
Yeah, I was always very, very visual. I've always engaged, observing things around me, but both artistically and technically. So, for example, my grandmother had quite a lot of glass objects, vases or just objects, both from Murano and from Bohemia, so where is now Czech Republic and Poland. And the other children in the family, they would look at it, but then, go away. And I would just stay with those objects. How is it made? How can you get this green? How do you get this gold? I would just really be engaging with
the process behind.
How was this made? The process behind. What is it? And also, why is there this woman with this owl and this half moon? What does it mean? Why
symbolism.
Is there exactly? Yeah. So that inquiry already, how it's made, so the technique and the concept. What does it mean? I don't know why I was just always engaged with it.
To try to understand the why behind.
Yeah.
Do you always go from a theory process to a making things, or sometimes not? How is the process?
So sometimes not. So for example, there's some works, so I think what happened is that because I've always liked studying art and language and history and philosophy were my favorite subjects in school. I just this kind of overloading myself with readings and looking at art. I realize it's very, very privileged to have had the opportunity to come to Europe twice as a teenager, and of course, very intense experiences. And of course, I was at the Louvre, the Van Gogh Museum, the British Museum. At the age of 14, these were like very intense experiences, or at least to me they were.
It was.
And so when I started having ideas for works of art, sometimes and a finished piece would just flash in my mind, and the process of understanding the idea I had was actually retrospective.
Yeah.
So that was very much the case with the sculpture Medusa. I had visited the Art Nouveau exhibition at the Victoria and Albert Museum, which was back in 1999, about 3 or 4 times. Bought the catalogue, couldn't have enough of reading and looking at that catalogue, and some other books. And after just spending ages surrounding myself with books, and then I was like, hang on a minute, what if I make a Medusa that
with
instead,
this twist, and then you change always
instead
something.
of being a woman with snaky hair, it's a brain, but the curls of the brain are the snakes.
That's the brain I saw at the cemetery.
Yeah.
Okay. Because
Yeah. So and then that was an idea that I had the idea, and then I started tracing back the history of why I ended up having the idea. And so it was completely subconscious, everything that had been stored in my mind eventually.
Could you please explain that brain? Because
yeah, of course.
I think it's worth it. Yeah, totally.
Okay.
That exhibition, by the way, was with 3 or 4 pieces, not more than that.
So it was 3 sculptures
beautiful.
And then 2 drawings that had then been printed on canvas. Yeah.
In a very special place, and not many people have had the privilege to
exhibit there. It was amazing. It was an exhibition of my body of work called Minotaurs of the Mind. The body of work is not finished yet because these sculptures are expensive to make. They're difficult to make, laborious, expensive materials. And so the idea is that each time I manage to finish another piece, I'll then have another show.
In the same place? Not necessarily.
Not necessarily in the same place. But the interesting process was that, so Medusa was the first idea I had, wasn't part of a body of work yet. I was 23 when I had that idea. So it was 20 years ago. And then from that idea, I start having, the other ideas that would connect to that. And then I realized, these are all very related to the darkest aspects of the human condition, or aspects of the human condition that we wrestle with. So evil, vanity, superficiality, or suffering. And Medusa. So why I ended up having this idea in particular. So of course, I grew up with a lot of Greek mythology. My dad used to read Greek mythology to me when I was little, going to museums, having visited the British Museum, the Louvre, and all the classical sculptures, and having read so much. But then also all the glass, the glass that I had looked at as a child, and then I
from your grandma collection.
Exactly. Yes, actually, yes. because there was a very specific reason that I wanted that Medusa to be in glass. At the time, I was really into the turn of the century, so the fin de siècle. And I wrote essays, my bachelor's degree, and then my dissertation for my BA was all about the turn of the century in Vienna, so Freud, Klimt, had bits of Nietzsche and Marler as well. So I realized that my sculpture Medusa is very Freudian. It's a very Freudian take on
Totally,
myth.
yes, I can see that.
And very, the Medusa's Head essay by Freud. And I was actually obviously really enjoying this process of, everything I know about the myth, and then how people in the 19th century were rethinking the myth and the whole idea of the femme fatale, but also psychology and psychoanalysis that, it was emerging as a science. And so presenting Medusa as just a human brain. Of course, first of all, well, is it a woman? Even though I kept the name Medusa, which is a feminine name, but you look at the image, and how do you know it's a female brain or a male brain? You can't know.
You can't tell.
Human, exactly. And I'll tell you something about the work. I actually never really get a chance to talk about it. But so when I had the idea for this work, I had not studied glass making yet.
That's something you learn here.
I learned here. And because I began having so many ideas in glass, then I went on to study glass making. And Medusa was really difficult. Technically, it was really difficult. From the moment I began studying glass, it took me 5 years to understand what I had to do
to make that piece. Oh my God, that wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, and of course there was this bizarre coherence that a piece which is in the shape of a brain requires a lot of brain power.
Exactly.
For me
brain
to resolve
brain work.
A very brainy process for me to understand what I had to do. Because if you think of the shape of the brain with a brain stem on top, how do you put that on a plinth? It doesn't sit on a plinth. So eventually, and also if you understand casting, whether it's metal or glass, the lost wax process as it's called, you need to end up with a negative mold with an aperture for you to either pour the metal in or have the glass going in the mold for it to be cast. But if you think of the shape of the brain, the only possible aperture that you could have in a mold would be the tiny bit of the brainstem that you need to turn the piece upside down.
And how do you keep the shape?
Well, how do you have the air going out so the glass could go in? And how could you see inside the mold that the mold is perfect? Because you have all this snakeskin texture inside the mold. How could you even know that you've de-waxed the mold properly? I mean, it's just like, how am I going to do this? And eventually, after having made all the work, I was like, actually, I need to do 3 open molds, so you can cast 3 parts separately. And then one, you can see what you're doing for each one of the molds. B, if anything goes wrong, instead of wasting an enormous amount of materials, you can,
which is expensive, I guess.
And also to fire it all, because you would need a huge kiln. It would take a long time.
Is it longer than other materials?
Yes, it is. It is because
glass.
Yeah, because you need to cool down glass at a much slower rate than metal or ceramics.
Okay.
So if that had been cast in one piece, gosh, that would have been what, 2 months, maybe 2.5 months to keep the temperature even throughout the piece.
Wow.
because there's so, the discrepancy of a size. So, where the brain is at its largest is quite long, but the narrowest, which is the kind of little tail of the brainstem, that would have been a lot hotter
than the rest.
Yeah. So casting it as a 3-part also ensured that it would be a much easier process. But then finally, to display it, because I then had the idea of creating a glass plinth, and the brainstem is inside the glass plinth, and the brain halves are on top of the plinth. So then you can see the brainstem encased in the plinth, and the brain halves on the plinth. So resolving that, the whole technicality, the whole process. Of course, I really enjoyed it. I confess.
We can't see it.
That I most likely thought about that sculpture every day.
Really?
Every day. I would. You say if I was just not doing anything, I was like, how am I going to do this? How am I going to do this? Just like quite obsessive in a way, but really pleasurable.
Did you make yourself the structure where it was displayed?
No, so you had to hire people who make that, because it requires glue, and also it's very, very heavy, which is the other good reason for having made it in 3 parts, because
what is that piece now? It belongs to a collector, at least?
It belongs to a collector, so
Good.
I sold to a collector. I will not disclose even their gender, but they prefer to not mention anything, to not say anything. It is still in my bedroom, but it's sold. And it's there safe for whenever they have an opportunity to come and collect it.
I guess it's a good reminder for yourself to know what you are able to do if you want.
Well, yes, but also I realized that, if I want to be able to control and make things myself, I have to, scale down, because it's very, very heavy. I cannot lift that piece on my own. I can barely lift one of the halves of the brain. It's because it's pure lead. It's lead crystal glass. It's really heavy. Hence me then, for ages thinking, what is it that I can make in my kiln? Because my kiln is tiny, like this. And so the idea for the glass hearts, which I can then 100% make myself, because Medusa had to send to another artist who has, enormous kilns, a proper industrial scale studio. But luckily he's a wonderful, wonderful man, Colin Reed. Lovely person, and he cast the work for me.
The hearts have been exhibited in Boston.
Yes, they have. Yeah, so the hearts was actually a very interesting thing that happened with them, because I was still testing, phasing of test piece. I normally don't do test pieces.
You go for it?
Because I can't afford to make test pieces like Medusa. You can't afford to make that.
It has to be good.
It has to be just like, and actually that was like, whoa. I remember when I made, it was like, right, okay, ready to go, ready to make this finally, and then an exhibition opportunity appeared out of the blue, and I exhibited it. Just finalizing the making of it, and went straight to the National Trust Sutton House in Hackney, and from there it went straight to the Savile Gardens in Windsor, which is part of the great Windsor Park, and I was just like, oh my god, how I've pulled this off. That is the first cast, no test piece, and then going to 2 prestigious institutions, heritage space, the National Trust, and then the Crown Estate. So I remember being quite like excited, really, really happy, but at the same time I was just like, wow, worried, because it was like I realized how edgy that had been, because if at any stage anything had gone wrong, I would have missed out on those 2 exhibitions.
And in all these years that you have been living in London, how has been your connection with Brazil? Have you still been in touch? Do you go there frequently? How many exhibitions have you had the opportunity to?
So I used to go to Brazil more often
At the beginning,
because a ticket to Brazil was a lot cheaper. And I did do modeling in Brazil, and I still had some like contracts. I remember my grandmother had power of attorney to sign contracts for me, and a couple of TV ads that I did. And you know, sometimes your contract expires, but then they want to run the advert again.
Yeah, so
you resign a contract, renew the contract, and you get some more money. So I actually had the opportunity to go to Brazil more often. And then that dried out. Of course, I moved here. And then tickets to Brazil went up from 500 quid to nearly £1,000. And I actually have only been to Brazil once in the last 7 years. So I went once in 2017, which was nearly 3 years ago. And before that, I went in 2013. And before that, I went 3 times in 2011.
Not much.
But not much at all. I would like to go more. I would like to exhibit more in Brazil, but clearly I'm out of the loop.
But you did an exhibition in Brazil. You had an exhibition in Brazil. Which one was there?
So I have done only one solo show in Brazil, which was called Punhados de Possibilidades, which means handfuls of possibilities, because I basically, it was what I could do because all my work was here. How could I transport work to Brazil? So it was what was possible. And I really enjoyed doing that show. It was a beautiful little museum in Itatiba, Museu Padre Lima, and a converted colonial house. I did what I could, but really enjoyed it.
Can you describe the piece you presented
so
there?
I exhibited, I actually filled up virtually the whole museum, which was quite impressive considering I don't have a studio in Brazil. So I exhibited a series called now Decadence, which is this velvet stretching on canvases. And I made all these abstract glass shapes with gold leaf in the middle. So I exhibited that body of work. And also Flagellation and Silice were exhibited there. And then this one room was this big installation piece called Pudica Pose, very much drawing on the Praxiteles sculpture of Venus, of Knidos, or Aphrodite of Knidos, because that's Greece. So in Knidos, in ancient Greece, there was a temple for Aphrodite and there was a temple for Demeter. And the courtesans would worship Aphrodite, and women who had children, or family women, would worship Demeter, goddess of fertility. And art historians argue that the first fetishized image of a woman is that, even though the original does not survive, but there is a whole tradition of the pudica, what's become known as the pudica pose or the Venus pudica. So the Venus of Milo, for example, is made in reference from that Aphrodite, exactly, which is the classic pose that Venus or Aphrodite is covering themselves as a male onlooker sees them bathing and they cover up.
Yeah.
So that is a fetish because, of course, no women would pose like that if they. So that is the
because it's that contradiction between I don't want to be seen, but please watch at me.
Well,
which is the idea,
but also from the viewer point of view, knowing that the woman does not want to be seen, but they want to look. Yeah. But actually, they want to look, but they don't want to see everything.
Exactly.
They're wanting to see, but not wanting to see.
Don't show me everything.
Exactly.
Because it means that you don't deserve my.
Well, yeah. So all
my
tensions and
generation,
complications generated
which are very
from that.
interesting.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm not the first artist to have explored this idea. Tasta Dean made films of women bathing in Budapest.
But what made very conceptual what you did is that there's actually no Venus.
Exactly.
So describe the piece.
So my take on it was that, it was again very Duchampian, ready-made, and I just bought this, big white drain pipes. So because they're white, they kind of allude to marble, but so they're completely, obviously, non-sculpted. There's no curves, no drapery, no identity, no personality, no provocation, nothing. It's that kind of a nothingness. But then I put laddered hold-ups on them, and you'd associate laddered hold-ups with actually quite, slutty sexuality or banalized, corrupted, decadent. And so the juxtaposition of this kind of a nothingness with that sense of this corrupted and banalized sexuality, that's what I wanted to do. And loads of them, because, the whether it's a Venus, Pudica, or an Aphrodite, it's one carved woman, that attention to detail, labored in, whereas loads of pillars, and of course, the pillars, and there's a reference to the phallic symbol, but in loads of them that, is nothing in particular. So kind of how desire and sexuality can be so banalized and trivialized. So, which kind of stems back to this, fetishized, non-real, idealized sexuality of Aphrodite.
Is that a subject that present in many of your interests?
In recent work, there's been a shift of interest. You move on, but I would say from that period, is still in that frame of mind. My piece, Veins of Vanity, I would say relates still a lot to that, which, I wanted to make a work of art that was about vanity. The history of representations of vanity are, vanitas, which are gorgeous paintings of beautiful, luxurious objects to criticize vanity, but what they do is that they trigger in the viewer a desire to own those objects, even if it's communicated to you that is sinful or bad or superficial. If you want to look at it from a secular point of view, that's superficial, or from a Christian point of view, that is sinful. And I thought, well, what is it that I do that is vain, that is superficial, that could be said a sin, but I can't resist doing it.
Yeah.
And at the time, I loved wearing corsets. I could go to the supermarket wearing a corset.
And you have been a model of corsets because famously, you have a very, very tiny waist. So good model for corsets.
Yeah, exactly. So that led me to model to various.
Well, because all those contradictions should be inside of us, and we should embrace them. It's actually good to have them, because that leads you openly and to questions, instead of making barriers and thinking that this shouldn't go with this, or that doesn't make sense if you believe this or that.
Well, and I think contradictions are inherent to humans, maybe,
and to intelligence.
In order to be a human, maybe you need to be a contradictory being.
But somehow also, the more I understand that we should be very consistent with our thinking and morals and ethics. Mm-hmm. Consistency is important, but also accepting contradictions and describing the tension between things. It's not just opens your point of view, but for an artist, it's an amazing territory because you don't have to answer these questions. You just have to show the tension.
Yes, you don't actually have to provide an answer. You can
Exactly.
just put it out
Put
there.
the tension there.
But I think I definitely agree with you in the sense that, recognizing your own flaws and faults is important instead of pointing your finger and just criticizing everybody else.
And accepting them makes you to understand from where they come and why they don't go.
Exactly. So,
Somehow.
and it's interesting because actually, I think I've managed to exhaust that because nowadays the thought of putting on a corset makes me tired.
Yes, sometimes
just the thought of opening my corset drawer and I have 10, 12 of them. Just so I can't be bothered.
I couldn't relate more to that. I also love very constrictive or very, very structured pieces of clothes.
That is not the problem. It's just putting them on.
Exactly. That's
walking to the train station in one of them. I just really don't have patience for that anymore.
To deal with the attention.
That is another thing. The attention you get that is so unwelcome, and it's very interesting how people completely change their behavior in relation to you when you're wearing a corset. First of all, they think they can touch you.
Yeah.
It drives me up the wall. It's just like, I'm not a doll, I'm not a toy, but now because I'm wearing a corset, yes, I have become an object, and you think you can touch me. Worst of all are women. Women all of a sudden is just like they just really want to grab you and touch you. It's actually really interesting. And as an exercise,
somehow it's like giving permission to the others.
Exactly.
That's what people feel.
And so, for example, corsets that I really like, especially that are in light color, I will not wear out because it happened that, and actually I remember being at the Leighton House Museum where you would think that you would be safe. And people just grabbing me and their hands are dirty and it's a silk corset, get your hands off.
I was going to ask that. What's the more valuable piece of corset you have? Are they really vintage? Are they really special?
No, my precious corsets are all made by my friend Tonya Mez. She's German, she lives in Berlin, and she's an old friend. I've modeled her first catalogue, and she's wonderful. She's a dear friend, and her pieces are very special to me. And this one in particular, which
are they handmade? I guess.
Yes, they're made to measure. Of course. In she knows my body perfectly. I don't even need to get my measurements. She knows. But so as an exercise of testing how people change their behavior in relation to me when I'm wearing a corset, I have worn either an old corset or a cheap corset out and just like relax, let's see what happens. And inevitably people are just like touching, and it's just like it doesn't cross their mind that they are being rude, invasive, that they are harassing me. But it was just as a test. It's like let's do it and see what happens.
Yeah.
And it's horrific. It's absolutely horrendous.
Well, that can give you an idea for the future. Have you ever made a corset as a sculpture or piece?
Yeah, so these Veins of Vanity, I don't know if you have ever seen.
No, I haven't.
You haven't? Okay.
No.
So I wanted to make a comment on vanity, and actually I was still studying glassmaking when I had the idea for the piece. Because we had to choose a piece of text and make a sculpture from the piece of text. And I chose a sentence in one of my favorite books, which says, "The violence of your beauty." And the title of an exhibition held at the ICA in 1998 called Die Young, Stay Pretty.
Oh, amazing. Sounds great.
And so, violence of your beauty, well, corsets are violent, but they're beautiful. Die Young, Stay Pretty, well, that's wearing a corset. And the sculpture is a cast of my back after I'd been wearing a corset for a long
yes, I have
time.
seen it. Yes, of course. Yeah. And it has all the
indenting.
Yeah.
And it's and it's interesting because of course people who don't understand the process of casting have said, "Oh, but it's a very subtle scarring." So, well, that's because it's been a process of negatives and positives all the way to glass that kind of toned down the indenting. But if you were to see my back when I took the corset off, it was brutalized by the corsets. So that's, in relation to the vanity. And of course, as you're saying, your internal flaws. So the indenting on my skin, of course, that brutality is a signifier for the destructiveness of vanity as an inward, as a personality or, a psychological flaw, whatever you want to call it. But because the glass is so transparent and the way it's being polished, so it's hyper polished on the front, perfection, and the back is sandblasted. So you can't see through the back where all the indenting is, but you can see perfectly through the front. So you see, it's an internal thing because you don't see the back. You see the marks as if you would be seeing from my belly. So
yes. So you see the internal side.
Exactly. You see through the body. And it's precisely that what I wanted. This is why they're called veins of vanity. As something happening inside.
Yeah, it's conceptually amazing. How many hours were you wearing the corset to do that? How was the process?
So actually for that, there was actually a kind of a test piece for that. And I just wore the corset for a few hours. And the cast didn't come out well for a series of reasons. There was different glass in the kiln. But so when I finally got it right, because also the process of the mold making and taking the cast off my back, because if I was lying on the floor, the mold mixture would flatten my body. But if you're standing, then the mold mixture runs down your body. So you had to be at a kind of a 45 degree position to
how do you hold?
When finally, the whole piece was done, and I was actually really happy with everything because I was, that piece, I feel I really have managed to be coherent with the concepts, the piece in itself, but also the properties of the material.
Okay.
Because it cannot be cast in bronze, it will not work. It cannot be cast in
resin.
It has to be glass, and it has to be that kind of glass.
It's not irrational decision. It's totally coherent.
Exactly. And so there is the coherence of the concept, the form, and the material. So I've managed to stay true to the material, to the transparency of the material, and the form, and the concepts. And that's actually quite difficult to achieve.
Yes. So you are very proud of that piece in particular.
That one, I think in terms of coherence, it's
consistency.
Yeah.
And you just finished, we were talking when you arrived here to Metralla Rosa house. You just finished your master, not finished the master, but the classes of the lectures of these master in theology and art, or was it Christianity and art?
So the name of the program is Christianity and the Arts, but yes, it is
basically
theology and
the art.
And Christian arts. Yes,
I would like to link this with Brazil, because somehow even if many of your pieces are super clean, aesthetically very clean and very minimal, there's also in all of them this Victorian feeling, this Baroque kind of sensation that I don't know why they always have brought that to me. And I never in my life have been in a more Baroque place than Brazil. And when I went to Brazil, I went everywhere. Belém, Manaus, Brasília, Minas Gerais, Sao Paulo, like Bahia, I said, Rio, Belém, I said. But well, I went to all these amazing churches. As I said before, my mom was always an atheist, but she was Italian, brought up Catholic, and she always had a fascination for the anthropologistic approach to And also
But
the
also
aesthetic
how
approach to
can-
Christianity.
Yeah, I think, how can anyone not be enthralled by Baroque aesthetics?
Aesthetic, and also the rituals,
Well, absolutely. I mean, Christianity, Catholic liturgy, processions, churches. I mean, they're all gorgeous.
Yes, they are. Yes, they are.
They're very seductive.
Exactly, especially if you are attracted by all these layers of meanings, because sin is always there, but then also you are always defying sin. How is it has to be with your childhood and your Brazilian memories, this fascination of you for Christianity?
Yeah, absolutely. Growing up in Brazil with all Catholic churches.
But do you think it would be different if you weren't being from there?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I realized that a lot of my work, I just get kind of a bit, say, Vane's Vanity. It's really minimal. It's, be Protestant.
It is
minimal.
It is.
But then
And you are.
But then I realized that the corset marks, all of a sudden it becomes ethereally Baroque. I get it.
Totally. And also
it's just
that battle between
yeah,
between the external and the internal, the good and the bad,
the body and the soul,
the body and the soul. Yeah.
And I think my piece Flagellation is one that is the least minimal one, and I did. I worked with an Italian jeweler, Danila Tacernale, who's amazing. And of course, being Italian, she got the concept straight away. She really enjoyed collaborating with me. And we designed, so the rosaries to be, that kind of sumptuous Catholic, and designing, the handle of the whip. The metalwork perfectly matches the metalwork of the bead, the crystal bead covers.
Is it full of symbolism?
The minute, the very Catholic, Gothic, and Gothic from the Renaissance and Baroque, but each minute detail that will have a meaning in a work, and that is very, very seductive to the point that you don't see what the work is about to begin with. You're just enthralled by the aesthetics of it.
Yeah.
And then you take a step back and engage with what it is, and that happens a lot, with works of art in churches in Brazil. At least that's how I engage with them. But you have this initial whoa. And then
sometimes even overwhelming sensation of my God, do I understand this?
Yeah, exactly. But I think the initial being whoa and not understanding, I think that is the intention. That's the desired effect, that you have to kind of lose control, and then you slowly start making sense of things.
Are you somehow all the time testing the intelligence of your viewers?
No.
Because after you come from places so complex, your train of thought is beautiful, is logical, it's engaging, is seductive, but feels like, okay, the result, here is the result. Let's see if you get it. I feel like all the time kind of tasted by some of your beautiful pieces. Is that the intention?
Yeah, so I wouldn't be so harsh to say I'm testing the intelligence.
I wouldn't say it like that.
But say I'm challenging the viewer.
Challenging, that's a much better word.
I'm offering a challenge. I'm just not offering something, hey, look at this, and and I cannot deny that out of every experience I've had in my life, there's nothing more rewarding than seeing people getting lost in a work.
Okay.
So because
getting it or getting lost?
Yeah, getting it and getting lost in it as they engage with it. So something that I have done quite a lot, I invigilate my own shows. So I don't say I'm the artist, I just sit there quietly as if I'm working at the exhibition and don't say anything. So of course I then get a chance to observe people interacting with the work, how they engage with the work. And it's really interesting because of course I've seen people who just look at it and don't get it and just like whatever there was. But times when I see people getting it, and you see the moment when they look and then they get it and they go, there's nothing like that. That's the most genuine and amazing feedback I can ever have.
Happiness for you. Yeah.
Well, yes, because that tells me that I have managed not only to offer, but I've managed to actually give something to the viewer. The viewer has seen something that the viewer has had an experience, a positive or interesting experience by engaging with my work. So I'll tell you a couple of moments. One with Medusa at Brompton Cemetery, that this woman walks in, she starts walking around Medusa, she's looking at it, and then she saw these snakes. First clearly she's just seeing a brain, and then she read the title, and then she saw this snake, and she goes, "Oh my God, that's brilliant! Oh my God, that's genius! Who's made this?" And I thought, "Oh my God, that's so lovely," because she's gone from kind of. And then
did you have a conversation with her?
Yeah, then I did, and that was really lovely. And the other one was Despair.
I love that piece.
That was more than one person, and particularly two people, and one of them was like, "Sorry, but do you know who the artist? Who's made this?" And I said, "Yeah, I do know who the artist is. Why do you ask?" "No, because, when I felt despair, that's exactly what I felt." And it was really interesting because they didn't say that, that represents what I felt really well.
Yeah.
No, it's like, that's what I felt.
Yeah, that's the emotion.
It's
there. It's capturing that.
That's exactly. And also, wow, that meant so much to me. And I was so happy that they could, it was kind of like they could see outside themselves what was inside themselves, that all of a sudden that was there in front of them, and they could see their feeling in a different way projected on the work. So of course I love it when my work provides a moment of enlightenment for someone. So I don't want to say that I test people's intelligence, but I can see why, because yes, there are kind of little, challenges there for the viewer.
And you actually smile and have that sinister face.
On the other hand, so there has been moments, with flagellation. There was a very funny moment. It was being exhibited in Brazil, and this very pious Catholic woman.
Where in Brazil was
it? Itatiba.
The same
show, solo show. Yeah,
the only show.
Okay.
Yeah. You have to come back.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I had other group shows. I've been in group shows, but the solo show, that is the only one.
Another
one. Yeah. And anyway, so that's a piece that really questions penance as a form of redemption or attempt of redemption, and
or hypocrisy.
all hypocrisy, and there's all this there's all these theological questions. And this woman she looks at the work and she goes,
"It's been long that I don't use one."
Wouldn't you give me one of the rosaries? So, and of course I can understand why, because the rosaries are really beautiful. Yeah. And of course you want, you want them. You want one of them. So, you sort of kind of, I don't really want to think about what this work is about, but could I have one of the rosaries, please? So, that's, but that tells me a lot.
That piece belongs to someone? Is it?
One of them, I made two. And yes, belongs to someone. This is the same person who's bought.
I'm always curious about that because, for example, now with Pathos Ocularis, those pieces, because you did an art residence.
Yeah.
How long was it, the residence?
So the residency started in January. The exhibition runs until May 2020. So yeah, and the work, yes, people can buy the work.
People can buy the work. That was I was curious to know if when you do a residency with an institution, for example, of that category, they were the owners of the pieces you produced during the residence. No, that's not the case.
Not in this case.
Not in this case.
There could be cases where you do a residency and they buy the work or they pay you to make the work, but not in this case. But of course, the work is not up for sale at the museum because the museum is not a commercial art gallery. But if anyone wants to buy the work once the show is over, then yeah.
Did it force you to somehow look at the conceptual tension that comes from the fact that you are thinking about the view, being an artist, thinking about the part of your body that allows you to see at things, when what makes an artist is what they see. How can they see what they see? It's also, of course, a process that involves many other organs of your body, but let's say that the eye have a very important significance, not only as an icon of that sense of is the window of your soul, is what people see of you, and they can read you through the eye. You can read the world through the eye, and also because it's related with all that situation that you suffered in 2015. Did it make you to think that, oh my God, I'm not here by a casualty?
Yeah. So. What made me feel? First, since that illness, my eyesight has not been the same. And that's something I actually struggled with quite a lot. So now I have, 2 pairs of glasses and, my eyes are dry. And so, this is why I have sunglasses and the self-portrait.
Yes, you always need them.
Yeah. The prospect of deteriorating eyesight is very scary and upsetting because I love looking at things.
Yes,
that's what I do. And in fact, one of the pieces that I made for the Optometrist Museum is a rare iconography of St. Lucy. So I made 3 pieces inspired by her. And one piece is that she has eyes in a place of the stigmata wounds of Christ. And of course, this, means, not just physical sight, but insights, what you see, your mind is enlightened. Santa Lucia, of course, her name is light. So it's not just about what you physically see, but how you interpret and take in what you see. But of course, you can't interpret and digest things if you can't see properly.
Yeah.
So yes, of course, was on the forefront of my thoughts.
Any project in the future that you would like to share with all of us?
So I think for the time being, really is just finishing my master's degree. So I'll be, involved in writing a long dissertation. And I have loads of ideas. Because the course has been very, very inspiring. So yes, there'll be loads of new projects once I've finished DMA. But for now, it's just writing, is mainly writing.
And the essay, dissertation, is it about?
So what I am hoping to write about is how female artists have engaged with the sacred and biblical narratives.
Good. Good luck.
Thank you so much.
Iluá. I'm not gonna pronounce your surname because I'm not gonna be told off again, and I'm sure I haven't got it. But thank you so much for accepting this invitation. It's been a pleasure, and we wish you the best of luck.
Thank you ever so much, you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.